Have you ever felt those intense connections with certain people in your life? Those looks that seem to say everything, those emotions that emerged without explanation, that feeling that someone was meant for you. But let me ask you something, what happens when that connection isn't reciprocated? What happens when despite everything you feel, the other person doesn't choose you in the same way? Here's the truth few people accept: the most important connection isn't the one you have with someone else, but the one you have with yourself. And today, I'm going to tell you something that will completely change the way you see love, because what you're about to hear, no one has told you before in this way. When you truly love yourself, when you value yourself, when you stop looking outside for what has always been within you, the right people arrive effortlessly, the wrong ones disappear on their own, and for the first time, you stop needing someone else to choose you because you've already chosen yourself. Your entire life, you've been led to believe that love comes from outside, that to feel complete you need to find someone else, that happiness lies in a relationship, in being chosen, in receiving external validation. But what if I told you that all of this is an illusion? That you don't need someone else to value you in order to feel valuable? That love isn't something you lack, but something that's already within you? That the quality of your relationships doesn't depend on others, but on how much you love yourself? Carl Jung said that what you don't make conscious will manifest in your life as destiny. If you're not aware of how much you're worth, you'll continue attracting people who reflect that lack of self-love. That's why many end up in relationships where they don't feel valued, where they give too much and receive too little, where the fear of losing is stronger than the desire to stay. But here's the truth: what you accept in your relationships is a reflection of how you treat yourself. If you don't love yourself, you'll accept crumbs. If you don't value yourself, you'll attract people who won't either. If you believe you don't deserve more, you'll settle for less. But when you love yourself enough, something changes within you. Your energy transforms, your standards rise, and without effort, without searching, without begging, you begin to attract people who truly match that value. Let me tell you something that reflects self-love in a relationship. Imagine someone who has spent years in relationships that don't make them happy. They've gotten used to giving everything, trying to fit in, adapting to what the other person wants. They believe that if they show enough love, eventually they'll be loved the same way in return. But no matter how much they do, they always end up feeling empty. Then, after another disappointment, they ask, "Why does this always happen to me?" But here's the detail: they never asked if they were giving themselves the love they expected to receive. They never stopped to think about how they spoke to themselves, how they treated themselves, how little they put themselves first. Because when you don't value yourself, you accept anything. And when you believe love comes from outside, you keep chasing it in people who can't give it to you. But one day, everything changes. That person decides to do something different. They decide to start giving themselves the love they always sought in others. They decide to treat themselves with respect, with compassion, with admiration. They decide to establish boundaries, to stop accepting less than they deserve. And suddenly, the people who were previously in their life begin to distance themselves. But it's not because something bad is happening, it's because their energy is no longer aligned with those who don't know how to value them. And the most incredible thing happens: they begin to attract new people, people who respect their time, who value their presence, who don't need to be convinced to stay. Because self-love not only changes how you feel about yourself, it changes how the world treats you. The most important relationship in your life. If you want to know what your future relationships will be like, observe the relationship you have with yourself today. How do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? How do you treat yourself when no one is looking? Do you give yourself the love you expect to receive from others? Because you cannot ask someone to value you if you don't do it yourself. You cannot demand respect if you continue to allow less. You cannot attract healthy love if you continue to act from need and emptiness. Carl Jung taught us that the people who enter our lives are a reflection of our inner world. If you want to attract strong love, you must first be strong within yourself. If you want to receive love, you must first learn to give it to yourself. If you want to build a healthy relationship, you must first heal the relationship you have with yourself. When you love yourself enough, you don't have to chase anyone. You don't have to convince anyone of your worth. You don't have to settle for crumbs, because the right person will arrive when your energy is strong enough to recognize them. And here's where we get to what's most important: your relationships always reflect the way you treat yourself. Look at the people who have passed through your life. Look at the relationships you've built. Look at how they've treated you, how they've loved you, how they've valued you. Because here's the truth that few accept: every relationship in your life has been a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. If you've been ignored, if you've been undervalued, if you've been given less than you deserve, ask yourself when you started treating yourself that way. It's not about blaming yourself or thinking you deserve the bad things you experienced. It's about understanding that what we accept from the world is an extension of what we believe we deserve. When you don't value yourself, you unconsciously give permission for others not to value you either. When you speak harshly to yourself, you surround yourself with people who do the same. When you treat yourself with indifference, you attract relationships that reflect that same disinterest. But when you learn to treat yourself with love, the world responds in the same way. Imagine someone who has felt their whole life that they're not enough. Every time they do something well, they minimize it. Every time they receive a compliment, they reject it with a nervous laugh. Every time someone treats them badly, they justify it: I must be at fault, maybe I deserve it. That's how love is, right? And so time passes, each relationship reinforcing the same story: people who only seek them out when they need something, partners who don't value them but whom they insist on holding on to, relationships where they feel they have to make a constant effort to be enough. Until one day they stop and ask, why do I always attract the same thing? And for the first time, instead of looking outward, they look inward. They realize that all their life they've tried to get from others a love they haven't given themselves. That they've accepted less because they never learned to demand more. That they've sought external validation because they haven't learned to validate themselves. So they decide to do something different. They decide to start speaking to themselves with love, to put themselves first, to stop justifying others' shortcomings. They decide to respect themselves so much that anyone not at their level simply drifts away on their own. And something incredible happens: the people who used to surround them start to change. Those who don't know how to treat them with love disappear. Those who do know how to value them come closer. Because when you change the way you treat yourself, the world has no choice but to adapt. The love you give yourself defines the love you receive. The people who enter your life are mirrors. They reflect what you believe you deserve, they reflect the wounds you haven't healed, they reflect the relationship you have with yourself. If you attract people who make you feel invisible, ask yourself when you started to ignore yourself. If you surround yourself with people who criticize you, ask yourself how you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. If you've gotten used to accepting less than you really want, ask yourself when you decided you didn't deserve more. The answer is always within you. Because when you change the way you treat yourself, you change what you're willing to accept from others. When you start speaking to yourself with love, you no longer tolerate hurtful words. When you decide to respect yourself, relationships that don't reflect that respect no longer have space in your life. If you want to know what kind of love you'll receive in your life, observe the love you give yourself. If you want to attract people who respect you, start by respecting yourself. If you want to surround yourself with people who value your time, start by stopping giving it away to those who don't deserve it. If you want to live deep and authentic relationships, start by stopping accepting superficial connections. Carl Jung said that what we deny within ourselves, we find manifested on the outside. If you keep repeating the same patterns in your relationships, it means there's something inside you that remains unhealed. But here's the good news: you have the power to change that reality. You can't change the past, but you can change how you choose to live the present. You can't erase the relationships that have hurt you, but you can learn from them to not repeat the story. You can't force anyone to treat you with love, but you can choose to surround yourself with those who do know how to do it. Because the love you seek outside has always been within you. Have you noticed how some people seem to attract healthy relationships, deep connections, and respect without even trying, while others repeat the same patterns of abandonment, indifference, and lack of reciprocity over and over again. This isn't coincidence, it's energy. Carl Jung said that what we deny within ourselves, we find manifested on the outside. That is, what's inside you, what you believe about love, about yourself, about what you deserve, is what you'll inevitably attract into your life. No matter how much you try to change the external, if inside you continue carrying fears, lacks, and unhealed wounds, you'll continue attracting relationships that reflect exactly that. But when you start working on your energy, everything changes. Let me tell you something. Imagine two people looking for love. The first is desperate to find someone. They feel lonely, incomplete, afraid of continuing without companionship. Every time they meet someone, they try to fit in, to do whatever is necessary to be chosen, regardless of whether it really makes them happy. Their energy is one of lack, of need, of insecurity. As a result, they attract people who detect that lack of self-love and take advantage of it. People who put them second, people who aren't really committed, people who disappear at the slightest inconvenience. The second person, on the other hand, has worked on themselves. They've learned to enjoy their own company. They've stopped begging for love because they no longer need it from outside, they've found it within. And when they meet someone, they don't try to fit in, they simply are. Their energy is one of abundance, of confidence, of fullness. As a result, they attract people who are on the same frequency. People who respect them, people who want to be by their side not because they need them, but because their presence is valuable. People who don't play games because their energy leaves no space for mediocre relationships. Do you see the difference? The first person projects fear of being alone and attracts relationships that reinforce that fear. The second projects self-love and attracts relationships that reflect that love. It's not magic, it's the law of emotional attraction. Your energy is a filter for the people who come into your life. Each person who enters your life does so because somehow they're in tune with your current energy. If you attract people who don't value you, check if you've been valuing yourself. If you find people who make you feel invisible, ask yourself if you yourself have been ignoring your own voice. If you repeat relationships where you're left aside, analyze if unconsciously you've allowed yourself to be an option instead of a priority. Because the people who come into your life aren't there by chance. They're mirrors showing you what you still need to work on. They reflect the beliefs you carry inside. They teach you through their actions what you really think of yourself. And here's the key, when you change your energy, you change the type of people you attract. When you respect yourself, disrespectful people no longer fit into your life. When you love yourself, people who don't know how to love feel uncomfortable and move away. When you treat yourself with dignity, people who only seek to take advantage disappear on their own. Not because you've made an external effort, but because your energy is no longer aligned with that type of connection. If you want to attract healthy relationships, you first need to become someone who vibrates at that frequency. Instead of seeking validation, start validating yourself. Instead of settling for crumbs, demand what you truly deserve. Instead of staying in relationships out of fear of loneliness, learn to enjoy your own company. Because the energy you project is the signal you send to the world about what you're willing to accept. If you want to attract real love, you must first be the type of person who knows how to receive it. If you want to attract respect, you must first learn to respect yourself. If you want deep relationships, you must first connect with yourself at a deep level. Because love isn't something you seek, it's something you attract when your energy is aligned with what you truly deserve. We live in a world where we've been made to believe that love is something to be sought, that if you don't have it you must go out and find it, that if you're not with someone, something is missing in you. We've been taught that we have to strive, that we have to do something special to be chosen, that if we manage to say the right thing, act in the right way, or be attractive enough, then someone will decide to love us. But here's the truth that no one tells you, real love isn't pursued, because when you pursue, you're telling the universe that you lack something. When you pursue, you put yourself in the position of someone who needs to be chosen. When you pursue, you focus so much on attracting someone that you forget about yourself. Carl Jung said, "What you resist, persists, and the same happens with love. The more you seek it from a place of lack, the more it moves away from you. Imagine this: think of a person who is desperate to find love. Every time they meet someone, their mind goes into alert mode. Will they like me? How should I act so they don't leave? What can I do to make them choose me? Without realizing it, they start molding themselves according to the other's expectations. They begin to suppress what they really want to say for fear that their authenticity will make them lose the opportunity. They begin to give in too much just to make the relationship work. The result? That energy of need is felt. And instead of attracting genuine love, what it does is generate rejection, because no one wants to feel responsible for filling another person's void. Because love doesn't work from desperation. Because when someone perceives that you need too much from them, their instinct is to move away. Now imagine another person, a person who doesn't seek, who doesn't pursue, who simply lives their life with fullness. They're not obsessed with finding a partner. They don't try to fit into what others expect. They're not worried about whether someone stays or goes. And without realizing it, they attract, because their energy is different. Because they don't project need but security. Because their presence is magnetic, not because they try to impress, but because they simply feel good about themselves. Real love arrives when you stop looking for it. When you stop trying to make something work with the wrong person. When you realize that you don't need to chase anything because what's for you will always find its way. The paradox of detachment: what you let go comes to you. The problem with many people is that they believe they must hold on to someone tightly so they won't leave. They think that if they stop trying, they'll lose them. That if they stop trying, the other will move away. That if they're not constantly reminding the other person how valuable they are, they'll never be chosen. But true power isn't in holding on, true power is in letting go and trusting. Because when you value yourself enough to not need to chase, you attract people who also know how to value. When you stop worrying about whether someone stays or goes, your energy becomes irresistible. When you understand that your life is complete with or without a partner, the right people appear without effort. Because love isn't something you beg for, love is something that arrives when you've learned to love yourself first. If you feel that you're always the one who gives more, who tries more, who fights more in your relationships, it's time to change your focus. Stop convincing others of your worth and start seeing it for yourself. Stop giving yourself to people who aren't sure about you. Stop making unnecessary efforts to retain someone who isn't aligned with your energy. Because what's real doesn't need to be forced. What's for you flows without pressure. What's at your same frequency arrives without you having to chase it. And this doesn't just apply in love. The best opportunities arrive when you're not anxiously looking for them. The most meaningful connections appear when you're already well with yourself. The healthiest relationships are built when there's no need to force them. It's like when you release a handful of sand: if you squeeze it tightly, it escapes between your fingers. But if you simply let it rest in your hand, it stays in place. Love is the same way. You don't need to hold on, you don't need to prove your worth to anyone, you don't need to be more than you really are for someone to choose you. Because when you learn to let go, when you learn to trust, the right love finds you.